Hi everybody, my name is Greg Hancock, and along with my paradigm-shifting friend Patrick Curran, we make up Quantitude. We're a podcast dedicated to all things quantitative, ranging from the relevant to the completely irrelevant. In today's episode, we talk about creating collectible trading cards for some of our favorite philosophers of science and the impact each has had on how we think about the practice of research. Along the way, we also mention goose mating calls, collapsed sinuses, Riverdance, comfortably numb, Pikachu and Jigglypuff, the back of Andrea Howard's car, pseudoscience, ad hoc immunizing maneuvers, well duh, reading Greek or eating paste, leeches and trephining, young Turks, Bart Simpson, frictionless vacuums, Hungarian homeboy, middle kids, protective belts, zone coverage, crossing the bar, V1, and pissing people off. We hope you enjoy today's episode. So I have to say, in talking to you a little bit this morning, you are sounding better than you did a few days ago. How are you feeling?
I'm not honking like a Canadian goose anymore.
Oh my God. Yeah, you were very nasal.
We get very few geese in North Carolina, but there was an entire flock behind my house because they thought it was some kind of mating call whenever I was talking. 20 years ago, I was pitching in a men's competitive softball league, and I took a line drive to the face. And it was actually the worst injury I've had. I broke half a dozen bones in my face. It collapsed a sinus. Fast forward 20 plus years, I ended up in the ENT guy's office because I was having pressure in my head, and he stuck a camera up my nose. And I don't mean that figuratively. I mean that literally, stuck a camera up my nose. And he paused and he said, "How in God's name can you even breathe?" And it turns out one of my entire sinuses on one side of my face was completely blocked, and I had no idea.
Wow.
So last week I had surgery. It was a 3-hour procedure. They went in and they cut and ground and drilled and sewed up. On the upside, I can breathe, but on the downside, sound like a Canadian goose. But one upside is there was no tragedy in the post-op coming out of anesthesia because I have a very bad habit of talking when I come out of anesthesia. And the last procedure I've had, I kept asking the doctor if she was pregnant. She was not. So I can chalk that as a win. My wife told me later, and I didn't even know this, you know, they always make you go in the wheelchair out to the car.
Oh, yeah.
My wife said that I got out of bed and the nurse was saying, "Okay, you have to get in the wheelchair." And I said, "No, I'm fine." And she said, "No, you have to." And I said, "No, I'm fine." And she said, "Look, you're unsteady. You're coming out of anesthesia. You have to sit." And I stuck my arms really stiffly to my side. And in the recovery room, I yelled out, "Riverdance!" And I started going, da 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 da. And I did it for about 10 seconds. And then the woman looked at me and she said, "That's lovely. Get in the chair." After I was home and getting my wits back about me, my wife was asking me how I was feeling and what I remembered, because the doc comes in, right, and stands at the foot of your bed and gives you your full medical report when you think you're Alice in Wonderland.
Comfortably numb.
My wife was saying, "Well, look, before I report back to you, what do you remember?" And I was like, "Well, I had this vague memory of this or that." And then I paused and very sheepishly I said, "And I also had this very odd memory of Pokemon characters somehow." And I said, "I don't know if it was the narcotics or what, but somehow Pikachu was involved." And my wife laughed and she said, "Oh my gosh, they had CNN streaming and there was some news story about Pokemon cards being stolen."
Police are searching for a group of burglars who broke into a trading card shop in Burbank, stealing an estimated $100,000 worth of Pokemon cards.
But it got into my head where I thought like Pikachu was bringing me ice chips or something.
Pikachu? Pika, pika, pika.
But I got to tell you, I was half in narcotics and half out of narcotics. And I had an idea that I want to pitch you, okay?
Okay.
These cards are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here is my proposal. I think we should make Quantitude trading cards. And the reason that the Pokemon ones are so expensive is they only make a limited number. So I think we should make a limited number, like one. All right, so I've got some construction paper, I have scissors, I have crayons. We're going to make one of each. So I propose we make half a dozen Quantitude trading cards, sell them for a couple $100,000 each, and tap out.
Okay. So who would we put on the cards, though?
What would our audience give us a couple $100,000 each to buy a card made out of construction paper and crayons? Are you ready?
Okay, let's have it.
Quantitude trading cards for philosophers of science.
I can smell money.
Show me the money!
I propose that each of us make 3 individual trading cards with philosophers of science, has basic facts on it, has some of the key things of what their perspectives were, maybe has like a quote on it or something.
Sure.
All right, folks, we have Venmo. On the show notes, there's a link. And each card you can buy for, what, $200,000? Does that seem... Now, why philosophers of science? When you do the business we are in, you do not have to be an expert in philosophy, but there really are core fundamental beliefs that guide our day-to-day activities. And it's really nice to think about where these came from. Who are the people that proposed them? How have they changed over the years? How do they impact how we think now? And really importantly is, what do people think these folks said versus what did they really say? Because a lot of times their perspectives have been simplified in a way that the corpse of this person would throw back their beer and come across the bar at you. All right, so how do you want to start?
You're the one who...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how about if I model for you?
All right, so your first card, your Squirtle or Jigglypuff or whatever the hell it would be.
A Jigglypuff?
I think that's a Pokemon.
That is so weird. That was my nickname in high school. Okay, I am going to start with one of my heroes, Karl Popper. Everyone out there, even if you're not in the game of academia and research, and you are out in the working world, or you are some poor kid stuck in the back of Andrea Howard's car right now,
Listening to the Daily Curling Report.
you should know Karl Popper. All right, so I'm holding the card in front of me. It's very carefully made out of construction paper and crayons.
Very nice.
He was born in 1902 in Vienna. Had to flee Austria with the rise of Nazism.
Wow.
Emigrated to New Zealand, became a professor at London School of Economics, where he founded the Department of Philosophy, died in London in 1994. He was most widely known as a philosopher of science, but here's one of the reasons why I really like him. He made huge contributions to philosophy of politics because of his experience in Austria and having to flee Nazism. He was vehemently anti-authoritarianism. He wrote a huge work called The Open Society and Its Enemies.
Wow.
He had remarkable contributions outside of science. His core premise was that science best advances not by collecting confirming evidence, but by subjecting our theories to serious attempts at refutation. It's sometimes called critical rationalism, or the term I like is strong falsificationism. He rejected the idea that was fairly prevalent for a very long time, that scientific knowledge grows just through the accumulation of facts and observations, right? And if anybody has read the book Lady Tasting Tea, there's a really nice section in there about early statistics where if you just gathered enough observations, you could compute compute the parameters of the population distribution and know what these governing principles were. You just had to get more data, more data, more data. Mm-hmm. And Popper rejected that. And the classic example is you keep seeing white swans, white swans, white swans. Getting more and more white swans is not doing anything. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is search out a black swan, because that would falsify the hypothesis that all swans are white. Yeah. This stuff surrounds us in everyday life all the time. Mm-hmm. You look for disconfirming evidence. He had deep concerns with what we're talking about, which is induction. You look and look and look at the individual, and then you try to generalize. What he was really focused on was the deductive aspect of it, which is to make a testable hypothesis that can be refuted, and that's what he called falsification. And then a big thing to him was what he called the demarcation problem, and he was really focused on what separated science from pseudoscience. And he didn't mean like ESP and ghosts and stuff on pseudoscience, but it was more like Marxist theory or Freudian theory and psychoanalysis that was a pseudoscience because the theory could account for any observation.
Sure.
It was so flexible that it was literally impossible to refute either the entire theory or some part of the theory. And he liked what he called, and I love this term, bold conjectures. He has a line, I don't have it in front of me, but I remember in reading some of his work, but he talks about you need to put your theories in mortal risk on a daily basis. They're called conjectures and refutations. And so you develop a theory, propose a hypothesis, deduce testable consequences, and then you attempt to falsify the consequences. A theory is never proven, but those that survive are provisionally retained. Mm-hmm. All right, folks, does this start to sound familiar about null hypotheses and alternative hypotheses and rejecting, and also about pre-registration, open science, right? Popper's fingerprints are all over this. But here's where his political and his scientific views overlap a bit. This whole thing has a very anti-authoritarian character. There is a governing perspective, but it can be overthrown at any point. Right? So you have a governing theory, but you can have a falsified proposition that would then overthrow the regime. It's not coincidental that he was thinking in this way, given his anti-authoritarian character. He had a great term called ad hoc immunizing maneuvers. And what it was is when you had something that was not consistent with theory, you could protect the theory. Anybody, when you have read a paper, how many times has an author said, well, we had a weak manipulation, or our outcome measure was insensitive to change.
Sure.
Or the sample was developmentally heterogeneous. It was moderated by unmeasured variables. My favorite is the follow-up period was too short. We would have seen a difference if we had just waited longer. We see this stuff all the time, and Popper called BS on all of this, as what it was that you were protecting your theory from negative results, and he did not like that in the least.
Right.
Where he got a bit of a bad rap, even today, people talk about Popper being naive and overly simplistic. Now, that's a pretty bold sentence to call the founder of the Department of Philosophy at London School of Economics naive. He never felt that a single observation would reject a theory. He differentiated the logic of falsifiability from the messier process of science. His core perspective in this arena was that science advances by making itself vulnerable to correction.
I not only loved your description of Popper, I love your enthusiasm for the description of Popper. We are right in your wheelhouse with historical things, and you just light up. You had said that card that you made, there's a quote on the back. Can you read the quote that you put on the back?
My favorite quote of Popper is actually not philosophy of science. It's from his political writings. I find it apropos to society today. All right, so here's the quote on the back of the card. If you buy it for $200,000. All right, ready? If we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right to not tolerate the intolerant.
Wow.
I freaking love that. We have the right not to tolerate the intolerant.
That is spectacular.
So, 200 grand. It's now available to the first person. Just go to our show notes, Venmo us directly.
It's a bargain at twice that price, I tell you.
Okay, pitch me yours.
I didn't go get construction paper and crayons yet because I didn't know this is what we're going to do. If I were to make a card, I would probably start with John Stuart Mill.
Do you want me to go get him? The ground is soft. I can dig him up.
It's been raining. I'll tell you a little bit about John Stuart Mill. Before I do, let me just make this contextual statement. When Patrick talks about Popper, or I bring up John Stuart Mill, and we hear about some of their ideas, some of these ideas, it's possible that you will hear them and go, well, duh. You have to remember that historically, when people were wrestling with these things, these ideas weren't duh at all. The reason they're duh when you hear them right now is because they have woven their way into the way that we think about things, the way that we approach science. And I think that is particularly true of some of the ideas of John Stuart Mill. You're going to go, well, duh. But he was wrestling with the things he was wrestling with all the way back in the early 1800s. So he was born in London back in 1806, and he lived until the 1870s. One of the things about John Stuart Mill that is really a good note about parenting is that he was essentially created in a lab by his dad, where his dad was like, oh, I'm going to raise the smartest kid I possibly can. This kid at age 3 was learning to read Greek, right? Other kids are eating paste. He's learning the classics.
You want to know how good he is? He is better at this than you'll ever be at anything. My son has a gift, and once you acknowledge that, then maybe we'll have something to talk about.
His dad was all in on intellectual training from an extremely early age, which by all historical accounts, including John Stuart Mill's own account, had horrible consequences for his mental health. But it meant that he was raised very early on to question things, to think about things. He thought about the structure of arguments, the value of understanding an opponent's argument when you are trying to defend your own position, that you can't really even understand your own position until you can assume the role of another person. He thought a lot about politics. He thought about so many things. In our world, though, what he was wrestling with was really the foundation of causality. Now, of course, causality had been wrestled with for thousands of years. Philosophically, people have thought about causes in the sense of what are the causes of the universe, the origins of the universe, why are things the way that they are. But what he was trying to do was to lay out the laws for establishing causality. And causality is a word that for a while we might have been shy about using, but I think now the word causality, and I mean now in the context of science, the word causality is front and center in everything that we do. And what John Stuart Mill laid out was a lot of the different conditions that we need to try to establish causality, the things that we routinely talk about and ascribe to John Stuart Mill, things like having temporal precedence, things about having a relation between variables, things about controlling for other variables. Again, these are things that are so familiar to us that maybe we don't think about them, but the things that he was wrestling with resonated throughout all of the things that were to come, like experimental design, like causal inference, like having comparison groups and what we can and cannot get out of observational research, the ideas of adjusting for variables in regression, right? These concomitant variables. So his thinking laid down a lot of the philosophical groundwork for things that weren't going to be developed for the next 100 years, but he's at the foundation of all of it. So my number one card is going to be John Stuart Mill.
It's interesting because it's virtually impossible to look back historically about what wasn't known given what we know now.
Yep.
Whatever that is, right? Leeches, they use leeches. Oh my gosh. It's like, okay, but at the time,
That's right.
that seemed like a good idea.
Yeah.
But the humbling thing also is 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, oh my God, these people made each other listen to podcasts? Like, that's the equivalent of like trephining, where you drill a hole in their skull to let out bad spirits. And that's what you're talking about with Mill, is we look back and it's like, duh, the cause has to precede the effect. The cause has to be demonstrably related to the effect. There can't be alternative explanations for the cause and the effect.
Yep.
I mean, that's like middle school level stuff. It wasn't 200 years ago. I realize that you have not prepared to the extent that I have with construction paper and crayons. What is your John Stuart Mill quote?
I have a quote that's not about causality specifically, but it's probably my absolute favorite John Stuart Mill quote. It's about how much trouble we have letting go of our models or our theories, our constructs, even when the data don't fit. Here is the quote. The tendency has always been strong to believe that whatever received a name must be an entity or being having an independent existence of its own. And if no real entity answering to the name could be found, men did not for that reason suppose that none existed, but imagined that it was something peculiarly abstruse and mysterious.
I think you're going to have trouble fitting that on the back of your card, but Godspeed.
What do you got?
Popper forms one bookend. Thomas Kuhn forms the other bookend.
Sure.
If you have not read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, this is absolutely critical reading if you're actively working in a research program. Mm-hmm. It is not only just fascinating in its content, but it's just wonderfully written, engaging, really easy to get through. I love that book. Mm-hmm. All right, so I've got my card here. Born 1922, you ready for this? Cincinnati, Ohio.
Really?
Family moved to New York. He did a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in physics at a small local college called, Harvard. Then he was hired as a professor at Harvard. And then here's something for all you young folks out there. He was denied tenure. Harvard turned down Thomas Kuhn for tenure, okay? So then he went in a series of equally small, obtuse little schools like Cal Berkeley, Princeton, and MIT.
Oh, slumming.
Never to come back to Harvard, mind you. Uh-huh. He died in 1996, all right? So Popper was 94.
Wow.
Thomas Kuhn tapped out in 96. His key work is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Yep. It was published in 1962. What it really was is he was primarily trained as a historian of science. So he was like genetically predisposed to look at history and context. What he wanted to do was shift the attention away from formal logic of science to the history of scientific practice embedded within a sociological context. He rejected this view that science is just kind of this steady accumulation of facts. And he proposed these two terms that I love of normal science and revolutionary science. He developed a term that everybody knows and loves, and that is a paradigm. It's a framework that defines what are exemplary problems, what are appropriate methods for studying those, what are standards, what are assumptions, what are the instruments that we use, what are the values that we hold. Think about grad training. Think about the first year grad sequence. Think about the first year research design class. We indoctrinate our graduate students into our current paradigm. Here is how you do business. We take measures and we look at distributions and we get parameters from distributions and we can do an ANOVA or a regression or a factor analysis or a cluster analysis, right? We're embedding them within the current paradigm. And what Kuhn argued is most science is what he called normal science. And this was a good thing. And what he talked about is it's puzzle solving within an accepted paradigm. All right, so that's kind of what we do. We have this paradigm in the social sciences. This is how we measure things, score things, analyze things, and we try to figure things out. We have specific problems we're trying to solve. We try to refine our measurements. We try to extend the applications. We try to better articulate theory. But the thing, and this is where he explicitly split with Popper, there was actually a very famous conference where they argued with one another in person.
In person, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Kuhn saw a anomalies, right? Things that were inconsistent with theory, not as a basis for falsifying the theory, but as a part of normal science.
Right.
Is they're just things that you can't explain. And he referred to those as anomalies. And he thought these were good things. Where Popper was really anti-authoritarian, Kuhn was very liberal as well, but he saw dogmatism of the paradigm as a good thing, right? We all have to have guardrails. We all have to have rules that we follow that defines our paradigm. The very thing that Popper was concerned about, Kuhn saw as a positive thing. But here's where Kuhn gets really interesting. Anomalies start to accrue. And sometimes you can ignore them, sometimes you can set them aside, sometimes you can change an assumption to account for it. But at some point, the field comes into what he called a crisis. The paradigm no longer accounts for the anomalies. There are too many, the weight is too much, and that is where you hit revolutionary science, and the old paradigm is replaced by a new paradigm. But you can think about classic ones of Ptolemaic versus a Copernican astronomy, moving from Newtonian mechanics to theory of relativity. And this is the source of the term a paradigm shift. There's literally an old paradigm is deposed, a new paradigm is imposed, and now you start normal science again. And you can see that historical thread that runs through it. This is constantly evolving over time where old regimes are deposed, new regimes are brought in, and then it starts all over again. Normal science, puzzle solving, the accrual of anomalies, and so on. The effects today we kind of see everywhere is science is not just formal logic, right? Which we often are taught. It's like this formal, rational, logical process.
Yeah.
This is embedded within history. It's embedded within context. At the top of the card, I put the little phrase, what is the kernel of Thomas Kuhn? He saw science as not merely a logic of testing propositions, but it's a historical, communal, concept-laden practice.
Popper was really thinking about the theory dies and it dies today because it didn't account for things. And it sounds like Kuhn is really trying to say, yeah, but it doesn't actually work that way in practice. It takes a while to accumulate a body of evidence before we finally decide we're going to lay something to rest and move to something else.
All right, here's my quote for the back.
All right, what is it?
I love this quote. Individuals who break through by inventing a new paradigm are almost either very young or very new to the field whose paradigm they change. These are those who, being little committed by prior practice to the traditional rules of normal science, are particularly likely to see that those rules no longer define a playable game and conceive another set that can replace them.
Oh, I like that.
I love that, man. It's the young Turks at the gate.
Yeah.
It's all of you kids out there that are going to depose old men like us. And by the way, you can have it. I want that Tacoma truck, and I'm going to go fishing. So it's yours for the taking. All right, give me your second.
All right, here's the next card that I would create if I had known we were creating cards. It will be Nancy Cartwright.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't she do Bart Simpson voice?
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be really interesting.
Do you have a favorite line?
My favorite one is, "Hi, I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?"
I gotta say, I think I'm like everybody else. Even though I work there, I never get over seeing the voice come out of you.
She has also done some philosophy of science related work. So Nancy Cartwright was born in 1944 in Pittsburgh, and she is still with us. She has had positions at other small institutions like Stanford and London School of Economics also. Her ideas have taken root in a wide variety of fields like economics and epidemiology and policy. But if you listen to some of the titles of the books that she has, you really get the sense that she's been coming at this from the traditional sciences. So, for example, How the Laws of Physics Lie. I love that title, one of the best titles. Nature's Capacities and Their Measurement. The Dappled World, a Study of the Boundaries of Science. She's thinking about things from a classical science perspective, but then also thinking about what are the limitations of science. And one of the things that we gravitate toward, that we celebrate in the science and the statistics that we practice are things like RCTs, right? What are we going to do to be able to isolate the effect of something. We call things like that the absolute gold standard. And she will say, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily apply. And there's a certain part of me that goes, what? What do you mean that doesn't apply? That's the whole idea. We're trying to pare away all of the other influences so we can isolate a particular cause. But what she would argue is that none of these things exist under those kinds of sterile conditions. We might read in a textbook a physics equation that perfectly describes motion that occurs in a frictionless vacuum, and her voice would echo and say, yeah, P.S., we don't live in a frictionless vacuum. When we talk about the acceleration associated with gravity, well, technically that's only near the surface of the Earth, right? So there are all of these contextual things that happen that make these laws that we strive for really be not necessarily quite as clean as we think. And when we do something like an RCT where we have absolutely cleansed the environment as much as possible so that we can isolate a particular treatment, that's all great. But will that treatment ever exist in that frictionless vacuum? No, it's going to exist in the real world. And there's this host of other contextual variables that are impinging upon the way things really have to function. And so she has been this wonderfully critical voice that makes us challenge the assumptions that we have. They might be assumptions in the way things are designed. They might be assumptions of the context in which we study things, but they could even be the other kinds of assumptions that we think about, which would be more statistical, right? Because everything is a model. We go, ooh, look, this characterizes what's going on. And we could hear this voice in a statistical arena like, yeah, but when do you have linearity? Yeah, but when do you have normality of errors? Yeah, but when do you have homoscedasticity? So she pokes at things because the reality is that it never exists exactly the way the model says. It never exists in that sterile environment. I love that. The phrase that you used early on in our podcast is, it depends. And to me, she is the voice of it depends.
Sometimes we get on these quixotic quests for something that doesn't exist. Universal constants, universal laws. I love that notion of it depends. Context matters.
So I have to have a quote for the back.
If you want yours to be worth $200,000, without a quote, it's only worth $150.
You poked at my last quote for being too long. So I'm going to go with a 6-word quote and just leave it at that.
Attaboy.
No causes in, no causes out. So what she's saying is that you cannot deduce or calculate or prove any causal relations exist only from the statistical or mathematical data that you have. If your starting assumptions do not already contain causal concepts, then the conclusions that you reach can't yield any causal knowledge. And I like that.
Okay, I like it. My turn?
Yeah. This
All
is
right.
your number 3.
This is my number 3.
All right.
This is going to be a Hungarian homeboy for you, and
Oh.
I need help on the pronunciation.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go phonetically, which I am telling you right now I know is wrong.
Okay.
So don't poke me in the eye through Zoom.
Okay.
Imre Lakatos. Now tell me how it should be pronounced.
If I am hearing my grandmother, Imre Lakatos.
Lakatos. All right, Lakatos. Yeah. As has come up on some prior episodes, well, maybe not, because you always start on these never-ending stories that I cut
And you
off.
cut them, so.
Yeah, so you may not know, but Greg's grandmother is Hungarian, and now that I said it, that won't be cut, so they now know. He was born in Hungary, 1922. He got a BS, MA, PhD in math, physics, and philosophy in 1944. For you history buffs, put yourself in Hungary in 1944.
Yeah, bad things happening.
The Nazis invaded Hungary. He was Jewish. He was jailed. His mother and grandmother died in Auschwitz. And if you count on fingers and toes, there is a non-zero chance that your grandmother and his mother was in Auschwitz at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
He was out of prison, emigrated to England, finished his studies at Cambridge, also became a professor at the London School of Economics, where he met Popper. You can see my through line on this, all right? And then he very tragically died in 1974. He was only 52 years old.
Wow.
I picture him as the middle child trying to get mom and dad not to fight. There was Popper on one bookend. There was Kuhn on the other bookend. And Lakatos was saying, wait. Both of you guys are right, but we need to tack to the middle so that we can all get along. And in the spirit of no good deed goes unpunished, right? He goes across the bar to break up the drunken fight, and then he takes a chair over the back for his endeavors. It just pissed off both of them. Interestingly, his real strength was philosophy of mathematics. Because he died so young, the book from his dissertation was published posthumously, but it's called Proofs and Refutations, The Logic of Mathematical Discovery. And he did remarkable work about philosophy and logic in mathematics. It was really quite interesting. But he functionally tried to mediate between Popper and Kuhn. He agreed with Popper that science has to be rational, critical, oriented to empirical testing, and that it needs to be subjected to falsification. But he also agreed with Kuhn that theories shouldn't be abandoned on a one and done just because of a single anomaly. And he also appreciated the historical context. Here's another term that we are all very familiar with. It's program of research. And what he saw was a middle ground between Popper and Kuhn. The unit of our basic science is our research program. There are four components of the program. The first is what he called the hard core of the research program. And those are the central beliefs, commitments that protect the theory. In the area that you work in, what are the fundamental beliefs that you have? So if you're in developmental psychology, there's a transactional relation between the child and the environment and the child. All right, that's like a fundamental core belief in that theory. But then around this hard core, and I love this term, he called it a protective belt. And these are auxiliary hypotheses, measurement assumptions, boundary conditions, model specifications. And it's kind of this flexible protective belt that can account for anomalies while still protecting the core of the program. But then you might ask, well, what about the paradigm and paradigm shift? Well, this is what he called the negative and positive heuristics come in. A negative heuristic protects the core by defining what you do not abandon, right? It's kind of like if you're going to play this game, these are the rules that can never be violated. But there's a positive heuristic, and what it does is it guides future research. So how do we modify assumptions? What are new problems that we can pursue? What are models to build? What are new predictions to make? And then how he reconciled the paradigm and paradigm shift is he said that a program of research could be progressive or degenerative. All right, so a progressive program is the theory is modified to anomalies, but it leads to new predictions. It leads to new discoveries. It has expanded explanatory power. So it doesn't just patch up holes, but it's literally growing and flourishing. So that's a progressive program of research. A degenerating one is when you start making modifications to account for anomalies just to protect the theory. So it's this post hoc, after the fact, you're trying for the program to survive by, he called it defensive adjustment. All right, and I love this because, again, it's an over time thing. Are anomalies allowing the program of research to flourish and proceed? Or are you just adjusting? To me, that's kind of like zone defense. My buddy had a great theory of parenting where when you have one kid, it's double teaming. When you have two kids, it's man on man. And when you have three kids, you drop back in zone coverage and everybody knows you can't defend zone.
The kids know that too.
And the kids know that as well. Lakatos did away with strict falsification, but he replaced it with this historical comparison of research programs over time. So what are the programs? How do they compete with one another or complement one another? And then which are progressive and which are degenerative? That's my favorite part of Lakatos, is this notion of progressive versus degenerative research programs. My little core statement that I would have on my card is what Lakatos did was he really was focused on asking, is a theory developing productively or is it merely protecting itself?
Wow.
Isn't that nice?
Very nice.
Yeah.
One of the nice things about the three that you chose is how they are so intertwined and responding to each other. So among Popper and Kuhn and Lakatos, who's trying to say, can't we all get along, where do you fit in all of that, do you think?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
All of us in our day jobs should be impacted by all three of them. Mm-hmm. How do we put our theory in mortal peril of Popper? How do we think about the paradigm within which we're working, and how does that affect how we do our science? And is it appropriate for what we know now, or do we need to develop a new paradigm? The notion of a paradigm is particularly salient for me because that's graduate training.
Yeah.
We are going to train up kids how we were trained. Just everybody who's listening who's been through the first year sequence, we've been teaching the same damn class for 40 years. That is our paradigm. I do think I'm most drawn to Lakatos because I too am a middle kid and I will cross a bar to try to break up a fight. I really will. And I will take a fist in the face as thanks.
Chair in the back.
I like tacking to the middle. This is kind of reflected in my final quote. Intellectual honesty does not consist of trying to entrench or establish one's position by proving it. Intellectual honesty consists rather in specifying precisely the conditions under which one is willing to give up one's position. Ooh. That applies to science. I think it applies to getting up in the morning until you go to bed.
Yeah.
You are dedicated to something, but that you've got a go, no-go point, right? They call it in aviation V1. It's where you're going down the runway and we're going flying, boys.
V1 is the absolute limit for a rejected takeoff. From this point on, V1 becomes our commitment speed.
That's V1, is you've got to know where that is.
You are going to tie in airplanes one way or another.
But at the same time, you have to say, if we hit this point and you demonstrate this to me, I'm out. I will change how I think about this. That's what I like about Lakatos. Okay, give me number 3, brother.
My last one would be Paul Meal.
Oh, you picked one of my favorite.
As near as I can tell, Paul Meal spent every waking moment of his life in Minnesota. Born in Minnesota, died in Minnesota, was at the University of Minnesota. I did not know Paul Meal, but by all accounts, he was an incredible character. He didn't mind saying things to piss people off, and it seems like he pissed a whole lot of people off.
But in fairness to him, he pissed them off because he made them defend their positions.
Sure.
He talked about things in a way and thought about things in a way that people would get uncomfortable with because they didn't always have a good reply to him.
Absolutely so. Any one of the things that I will quickly mention are things that you could dig into a lot more. But he was extremely critical in psychology of just the weak theory testing that went on. He thought that a lot of the theories themselves were really loose and weak, and the way that we were trying to test them weren't really tests. We would always sort of be flexible and go, oh, well, it still kind of works. And he thought that that was horrible for the science of psychology, but also telegraphed what Patrick mentioned earlier, issues of replicability, right? If you have these horrible theories, these things will either be so flexible that they'll just accommodate anything so as to be useless, or we'll never actually be able to replicate them because they're so imprecise, or the predictions that they lead to are imprecise, or the constructs that we're measuring are really ambiguous. So he was extremely critical of a lot of the stuff that goes on in psychology. He also coined this very nice term called the crud factor. When you measure a whole ton of variables, what he said is you're basically going to get get this low-lying correlation among tons of stuff, and it might even be a statistically significant correlation. He had all kinds of criticisms that reverberate into the overfitting of models that we might have, and researcher degrees of freedom, and the multiple comparisons that we do, and p-hacking. He was very critical of null hypothesis significance testing. One thing that was extremely irritating to people was him essentially championing the idea that people who are clinical experts in things, who make predictions about, let's say, patients or human behavior, he was basically like, regression model can do way better. And in fact, showed a number of circumstances where these people who were like, well, I am a clinician, I have the wisdom to be able to, he would just be like, oh crap, whatever. We can predict those things way better with statistical models that cut through all of your biases, all of these things that you think are wisdom that are really just clouding your ability to see things. One of the things that I was particularly drawn to in his work had to do with construct validity and latent variables, and just maybe what a crappy job we do at thinking that we validate things, right? We use the word validate. That's a validated measure. Oh, that's a validated construct. And something that Patrick and I talked about a few seasons ago in an episode we actually had specifically on construct validity is that you're never done with construct validity, right? It is the ways that we try to see into the constructs that we're interested in. If the constructs themselves aren't shifting, the ways that we get at those kinds of things may be very, very context dependent. So he was extremely critical of a lot of the construct validation things that we were doing. So I just loved the way that he was poking at damn near everything in funny but very pointed ways.
He's one of my heroes in the field, and one of the reasons that he would poke at clinicians is he was a clinical psychologist.
Yep.
He had the experience and the training to be able to say that the emperor has no clothes. Mm-hmm. So he was legitimately raising questions early on about taxonomies, about population subgroups. He had early days of looking at, do people differ in terms of quantity or quality? And he had these very clever statistical methods that were early versions of mixture models to try to find subgroups in data.
Yeah.
And he was old school. He wrote like essays that we don't do anymore, right? Because who's going to publish it? Nobody's going to publish an essay.
That's right.
But he wrote dozens and dozens and dozens of these. And indeed, Niels Waller, who you and I both know well, was very close to Meal, and Niels and others have an edited volume, and I think it's called the Paul Meal Reader. I don't have it in front of me, but I have the book, and I would recommend this if you're interested in really having your thinking process pushed, because even if you disagree with him, it sharpens you to say why you disagree or why you believe what you do, right? It's always playing tennis with somebody who's better than you are because it improves your game.
Yeah.
It's hard to overestimate his impact. Anybody who's in the game, this is the Meal of Kronbach and Meal.
Yep.
I mean, this guy was working at the highest levels. You know what's funny? You are going to have a bear of picking a quote for him because he has dozens of lovely things that he said. So what did you pick?
Which means I can only disappoint in my choice. The one that I picked, I just thought it represented his directness. It's from a paper called Theoretical Risks and Tabular Asterisks, Sir Carl, Sir Ronald, and the Slow Progress of Soft Psychology. That's the title of the article.
That's what we call a hook.
Absolutely. The quote is, "The almost universal reliance on merely refuting the null hypothesis is a terrible mistake." I think that characterizes the way so many disciplines proceed. They go, oh, we rejected the null hypothesis, and then they move on. They're not moving toward trying to understand something beyond that it is non-zero. There are problems, of course, with multiplicity, right? Having lots of different tests that you're running without correction. I mean, this guy is looking ahead at what will be the replication crisis, what is a need for pre-registration. His vision is aiming toward all of those things, and I like that he was poking right at the tool that everybody uses to do what they think is advancing their own science.
Dude, we are so long in this episode, but I couldn't not talk about this stuff. If you're one of the 3 people who has made it this far, We appreciate that. But this is fun, interesting, but also crazy important stuff. And most importantly, Venmo, PayPal. There's only one card each. All right. So that's why it's worth $200,000. The quid pro quo is when the 6th card is sold, we will quit recording episodes.
If that's not motivation, I don't know what is.
Dude, the narcotics are supposed to be out of my bloodstream, but I just saw a Pikachu peek through my window.
Pikachu, Pikachu.
So if it's cool with you, I'm going to step outside real quick.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Right, good luck with that. All right, take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. Quantitude has been brought to you by Pokemon-inspired collectible trading cards made just for academia. Try to catch the mysterious Dinosaur. This mischievous character is a master at hiding and can rarely be found, even though the executive assistant in the dean's office insists they are in the building. But keep searching, because if you're able to capture them, you can ask futile questions like, do you have any updates on our instructional budget? And you can't possibly think consolidating grant support services across the college is a good idea. Keep a sharp eye out for the HREO. These magical creatures run in herds and live in the basements of the Office of Human Resources. If you catch one, you might be rewarded with the authorization of your open faculty search for which you submitted the paperwork 8 weeks ago. But be careful. If they bite you, you'll have an overwhelming desire to watch hours and hours of poorly made training videos. And finally, be sure to set a trap to capture a Rev2. This truly magical creature feeds on the negative energy it derives from writing multi-page single-space journal article reviews that requires more citations to their own work and makes countless demands for revisions, many of which are directly contradictory with one another. This is an ancient creature that has existed since the dawn of scientific publication. You can subscribe to Quantitude on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your Pokemon fan fiction audiobooks, and please leave us a review. You can follow us on X, Blue Sky, or Instagram. We are at QuantitudePod, and visit our website at quantitudepod.org, where you can leave us a message, find playlists, show notes, class syllabi, and other fun stuff. Finally, get cool Quantitude merch like mug stickers and notebooks from redbubble.com, where all the proceeds from non-bootleg authorized sellers go to donorschoose.org to help support low-income schools. You have been listening to Quantitude, the least likely collectible podcast to ever be stolen.